Welcome to the Michelle Rempel-Garner podcast.
Hello, fellow patriots. This week, we busted the Liberal government for hiding some pretty important immigration data. And it's no wonder that they're hiding it, because this week there was a pretty damaging youth jobs report that came out, as well as some startling data on housing. Also, former campaign director for the Conservatives, Jenni Byrne, gave a pretty big interview. And we also noticed that the mainstream media is starting to lower expectations for Liberal Prime Minister Mark Carney. I wonder why. To break down all these issues, I'm joined today by veteran Conservative strategist and my chief of staff, Sean Schnell. How's it going?
Good to be back with you this week. I enjoyed last week with Tom, though, so if people didn't listen, they should absolutely go back and give last week's episode a listen.
That's right. We had Tory UK MP Tom Tugendhat join us last week. And it's a good reminder for those that are starting to regularly tune into this podcast, click auto download if you're getting this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and also click subscribe if you're listening to this on YouTube. So Sean, I was in Ottawa this week, as you know, back in Calgary now, and I noticed in starting to prepare for the fall session that the Liberals have not published any sort of raw immigration data that they're supposed to publish on a monthly basis since early this year, most from before March and some from late last year. Really sensitive data like the number of asylum claimants, the number of people that the Liberals have let in on low-skilled temporary foreign work permits, the number of people on deportation orders that the Liberals have removed or lost track of. So I brought this to the forefront. The Toronto Sun actually picked it up. They asked the Liberals why they weren't publishing this data. And this is sort of breaking news. This is a Liberal reporter, a reporter at the Toronto Sun. He got a response from Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, and I'm just going to read it to folks. The key important part is here. We're in the process of updating how we share immigration data with Canadians and improving how that immigration information is presented online. The goal is to provide clearer expectations of trends and greater context to help Canadians better understand data about key IRCC programs. So they're saying that they're not going to publish the raw data anymore, but instead publish what, Sean? What are they going to be publishing here?
Well, it's yet to be seen, but I think
Liberal talking points.
Yeah, you can read between the lines on this, and it's like, well, we need to provide context because people are too stupid to figure it out for themselves based on just the facts.
No, I think it's worse than that. The Liberals actually are going to try and spin what everybody with a set of eyes in Canada right now can see, which is the Liberals have let too many people into the country in such a short period of time that our jobs market, our housing stock, and our healthcare system, emergency rooms can't keep up. So I think why they did this was, if you remember back, this was in May, when the House first resumed after the election. I used some of the data that had been published previously. I stood up in the House and said, okay, well, you've let X number of people in as temporary workers. Why are you doing this when there's a youth jobs crisis? Then the minister stood up and accused me of spreading misinformation, even though I was using the government's own data. And I think what they're doing here is, rather than solving the problem, which is the need to overall massively reduce immigration or levels, because again, housing, healthcare, and jobs haven't caught up. They're simply hiding the information. That's what's happening here to me. Like, I don't see any other way to read that. It's censorship of vital information.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think they don't want people to see the facts. They don't want people to see the numbers. And this whole nonsense about, well, because even the minister said this to you at the time, if people remember, was talking about, wow, you're taking this out of context, and let me contextualize this for you. And it's this sort of infantile approach to it, where it's like, wow, you're too stupid to actually figure out what these numbers are actually telling. So let us tell you what it is. Let us paint our own picture. But yeah, let me spin you so that you can see things the way that we see it. But the reality is that they're actually talking about hiding facts, just straight numbers, and
Yes.
not letting people be able to interpret that for what they are. And so when you're hiding facts, when you're hiding raw data, and like you said, replacing it with whatever that might be, spin
Spin.
talking points, then all you're left with is political propaganda at that point. This is
Yeah.
not data that can be used in any way to measurably look at how many people are coming into Canada, how are we responding to these sorts of things. And that's what they want. They don't want people being able to look objectively at the data, look objectively at the information,
Yeah.
and draw their own conclusions. They want to give you the conclusion themselves.
Well, and there's an actual reason why that data exists, and it's so widely publicized, because there are so many different groups of people in the country that make critical decisions that rely on that data. So, for
Yeah.
example, public policy experts in healthcare planning at the level of any provincial government would use that data to do things like workforce plan for doctors and nurses, right? Housing developers, municipal officials who issue development permits would be using that type of data to say, like, okay, well, how many people are coming into the country? How many people are expected in our region? Labor market analysts, right? People that price labor, I mean, for good or for ill, use that data. And I can't, by them just putting spin out, it has this ripple effect across every level of planning that relies on that immigration. That it's critical data, right? And I honestly just think that this woman is so incompetent that instead of fixing the problem, she's thinking, okay, well, if I just issue liberal spin and hide the data, which again everybody can see, then the problem's going to go away, and that's wrong. We can't let her get away with this. Like, we can't let Mark Carney and the Liberals get away with suppressing vital information like this. It's egregious.
Well, and I think it's even simpler than that too. This is data that Canadians own, that they are entitled to.
Yes.
This is information that their taxpayer dollars go towards. So this is information that people use to hold governments accountable, so that they can see how
That's
are
right.
you using resources, how are you making decisions, what sort of impact is the policies and the dollars you're spending having, so that voters can be informed, so that they can hold governments accountable. And when governments start hiding data from people, it raises questions about how transparent are you, and why don't you want to be held accountable? Why don't you want people to be able to see the impact of your decisions? You should be proud of them. These are the decisions that you're making, and so show people what you're doing. And they don't want people to see what they're doing. They don't want people to see the impact of their decisions.
Well, let's talk about that impact. So the impact of the Liberals' failed immigration policies, which is bringing too many people into the country in too short a period of time, was on full display this week in two areas. First of all, was just an absolutely startling and grim youth jobs report. And the second was a housing forecast, new stock of housing forecast that was equally as, if not more, grim. So let's start with the youth jobs data, because I know this is something that's really near and dear to your heart. So why don't you walk through the youth job stuff, then I'll go through the housing. And you will see, anybody who's going to listen to this is going to see why the Liberals are hiding immigration data, because the results of too many people coming into the country in too short a period of time is this.
Yeah, so I know people, if you've been listening to us for the last number of months here, have heard us talk about this, and we've been raising the alarm bell on this for quite some time. And it has absolutely reached a crisis point in the youth jobs market. This is not some sort of partisan spin or talking points here. And so I've got three articles here, just the headlines to paint the picture here from this jobs report that came out this week here. So the first article here talks about Canada's economy back down to earth, shedding 41,000 jobs in July as youth unemployment climbs to the highest level since 2010.
Which is like, that was peak global financial crisis, right?
Yeah.
And we're in peacetime here right now, in a unique situation in Canada with youth jobs just being shed, right?
So, and that's the unemployment side of it. Now, the employment side of it is important to talk about too. Here we see youth employment falls to the lowest rate since 1998, and this is from Stats Canada.
That's wild.
And so, and just to put into context there, the difference between this is you have youth that are actually dropping out, like deselecting from the employment market because it is so bad. They've actually stopped looking for work. So you're seeing this employment number at the lowest level since 1998. These numbers are brutal. And the last one I just wanted to put up here is from the Logic. Canada's young workers are getting crushed. Youth and long-term unemployment are at a nearly 30-year peak, and those scars won't heal easily. And I think that's a really critical part of this conversation. This is a situation that is going to have lasting impact for many years. And so this is like the canary in the coal mine for the Canadian economy that everybody should be concerned about here right now. And the Liberals are nowhere on this. They're absolutely nowhere.
Think about this. You've got an entire generation of kids who, in theory, should be the managers, the thought leaders, the people with experience in a 10-year period of time who just aren't getting that training right now. Right?
Yes.
So what happens in 10 years as you and I hit, in theory, in practice something different, but like retirement age, right? We're starting to think about it anyways. It's completely bananas that we are abandoning an entire generation of Canadians to a no hope jobs market, where at the same time the Liberal government are now hiding and censoring the immigration data, which shows that while we're in the biggest youth job crisis that Canada has generationally seen in a long time, they're bringing in untold numbers of low-skilled temporary foreign workers, of foreign students with work permits to compete with that already scarce job market. And that's just unconscionable. That's not fair to anybody. I don't blame somebody wanting to come to Canada to build a better life. Our country has been based on immigration, but right now there's not enough jobs for Canadian youth. And the fact that they're hiding immigration data instead of fixing the problem is just morally bankrupt.
It's disgraceful. It's just mind-boggling, because these are Liberals that have been, many of them have been around in power for a decade.
Yeah.
And so they
More
cannot
than a
wash their
decade.
hands of this. This is their economy. This is their jobs market that they have created. And we talked about this on previous podcasts. This is a Canadian problem. We're not seeing this issue in other countries around the world. And so for them to say there's external pressures, no, it's not. This is a problem of their own making. It is as a result of all the things that you have outlined there. And so they wear this fully. And it's not good enough for them to be throwing out half measures, but they're not even doing that. I mean, I've got this tweet here from this jobs minister.
Oh, yes.
Here's what she's up to. Just wrapped up. This is from Patty Hadju, the jobs minister. Just wrapped up the G20 labor ministers meeting in South Africa. Canada's
Nice
working
junket,
with global
Patty.
partners to create good jobs and build resilient, inclusive economy. No, you're not. You're not doing anything. You're on an international junket here.
She's on a summer junket.
I haven't seen her anyway. I haven't seen her talk about this jobs report at all. Haven't seen her talk about youth employment or youth unemployment at all. You had earlier in the summer these Liberal MPs and ministers running around the country taking pictures with Canada Summer Job Students, which is a program that's been around forever, and now they've stopped because all of a sudden they've got these reports that are just devastating coming out here. I mean, it's ridiculous. And so, like, I'm curious to know, like, you've got these Liberals that came in 2015, all hope and change and sunny ways, and absolutely making promises to these young voters, this new generation of Canadians that were all excited about Liberals. And 10 years later, they have dropped them like a lead balloon. Like it's unbelievable
Well, I mean,
how quickly they have flipped on this generation,
yeah.
and aren't interested in them. They don't need their votes anymore, apparently, because they're not even concerned about this issue at all.
Well, and we're seeing it in some of the polling data too, right? Like we're seeing that Mark Carney's approval rating, there's only one demographic where he's doing somewhat well, and that's the above 65 cohort. And I don't want to say that it's unanimous among that cohort. There's a lot of
Sure.
people in that age group that don't have defined benefit contribution plan pensions. They don't have paid off mortgages, but that's really where he's doing well is a generation of Canadians that have already lived their lives and are financially stable and are well into retirement. It's a grim picture for Canadian youth today. Let's look at one of the other reports that I think is why the Liberals are hiding the immigration data, which is housing. So this weekend, really grim. Such cheery news for our podcast today. A really a grim forecast on housing. It was in the National Post. The headline reads, "Housing crisis may get worse. New forecast show." And essentially, the too long didn't read it version of this report is that, surprise, surprise, we're not building houses to keep up with the pace of population growth. And again, like the fact that the Liberals haven't massively lowered immigration levels in response to the youth job crisis, overflowing emergency rooms, but especially housing. I just want to echo what you just said. This decision will have an impact for generations to come, for years to come, because, if young Canadians, if they can't find a job, they can't find a house, do you think they're having families? No, of course not, because you can't. How can you possibly have a family, get married, move out of your parents' house if you don't have a job and you can't afford a house? So it's going to have an impact on, natural population growth in the country as well too. And I know that that's a topic that people sometimes cringe and go, "Oh, I don't know if we should be talking about that," but we should, and we should be talking about it in the context of data that the government provides to the public, which they have now suppressed and censored. And I just think that this is such a disastrous, underreported issue, that is going to have impacts for a long time to come.
Yeah,
Do
I
you?
think you're absolutely right on this issue. So when you're talking about the housing being tied into all of this, you are absolutely seeing the ramifications of many years of liberal policy decision making. And you have young people that are looking at this and saying, well, I have no hope, no hope. I was actually just talking with a young person this week, and they were chuckling, laughing at the saying the prospect of them ever owning a home. And so the
That's sad.
the reality is that they start looking elsewhere at other countries, other jurisdictions, to be able to say, you know what, if I can't make it here, maybe I can make it somewhere else. And then you start to see the brain drain of skilled labor and of
Yeah,
these young
that's a great
individuals
point.
that are trying to start their careers, and they're not interested in putting their life on hold. They're not interested in putting families on hold, putting their career on hold, putting the idea of home ownership on hold. And so they look around them and they see this beyond competitive, this impossible job market that they have no hope at breaking through. And they are starting to make other decisions. I mean, you and I, when we've been out knocking on doors in various elections, you talk to people all the time that say, I'm telling my kids, get out of here. You got to go somewhere else.
Yeah,
And I mean, that is just crazy that
it
is where
is.
we are at, where you have this level of crisis in a job market for young people. But then you take it to the next level of a government that seems totally incompetent and uninterested in addressing this issue at all.
No,
I
and
mean,
like I think you raised a very interesting point too that I forgot to mention, which is, if young people, especially some of our best and brightest in the country, they can't afford a house and they can't find a job, it's not just that they're going to forestall having a family, they're probably going to leave, right?
yeah.
And I do think that we're going to have more of a talk about brain drain and whatnot, in the next few years. So again, Liberals got to publish this data. We are going to hold them to account in the fall, as best we can, I'll be using all the parliamentary tools I have at my disposal to get that information. But I think it's morally bankrupt and completely short-sighted and dangerous that they've suppressed this information to begin with. But let's talk
Just before we hop
about,
on to the next one, I was going to say,
yes,
this issue is so important, and I know we want to keep talking about it, and I want to hear from people on this. So if you're watching this on
it's a great
YouTube and
idea.
you're somebody that is having trouble with the job, or you're in that boat, you're saying, yeah, I've been thinking about leaving. Leave a comment, tell your story on this. Find us on X, send us an email. We want to keep talking about this, so tell us about what you're seeing on this, and make sure that if you know somebody that's in this boat, share this podcast with them so they can get in touch with us as well too, because I think this is so important. I think this is one of the issues that we should be talking about, and we'll keep talking about it. So get in touch with us. Sorry, next.
Well,
You want to
no,
move
it's
on here?
okay.
Yeah.
It's a great point because it helps me do my job when I have actual stories to share in the House of Commons and in committee. So great point. Yeah, please drop us a note in the comments. Let's talk about Jenni Byrne's interview this week. So Jenni Byrne is the, I guess now, former campaign director for the Conservative Party of Canada. She's someone that you and I have known for over 20 years, worked with closely, and she gave a really big interview. It was over an hour. You and I listened to the whole thing. This is really the first time she's publicly spoken since after the campaign. She dropped some big news. She announced that she wouldn't be running the next Conservative campaign. And that's big news because Jenni's been involved in a senior role in most of the campaigns I've been part of in Conservative Party history, citing the reason that she needs to go back to her real life consulting business, and just talked about a lot of other things. I know you had some observations. I did, but I'll let you start.
Yeah, and so I'll preface this by saying, yeah, like Jenni's a friend, so come at this
Yep.
with a high degree of bias, and somebody that I have a lot of respect for, and somebody that I have watched do just exceptional things in a arena where it's hard to compete in the political arena, and do it at the top level for many years. So I was really interested to hear what Jenni had to say, hear her takes on this last election, but also hear what she's thinking about going forward. And I have to say, I'm somewhat disappointed to hear that she's not planning to
Yeah.
run the next campaign there. Happy to hear that she's doing it on her own terms, that it's her decision that she has made, and I think that she is doing it with a lot of grace and humility in the midst of what I think has been some pretty disgusting things said about her online, and some pretty irrelevant takes on her as an individual and as a campaign manager. Listen, like, campaigning and campaign managers, it's a pretty small group of people that have some level of experience at doing it. It's almost non-existent for somebody at the level of Jenni that has her level of experience doing it. It is probably a number of people that you can count on one hand, maybe, in Canada
Across political stripe.
that can run a national campaign at that level with any level of experience. And so I think, as a conservative movement and as a party, owe her a great deal of thanks, and she is owed and due every kudos and level of gratitude that people should give to her. And so I thought it was an interesting podcast interview. I'll be curious to know if she does more. She certainly doesn't have to. She owes nobody anything, but I thought it was a good insight into where she was at on things.
So let's talk about skills you need to run a campaign and skills you need in politics to be successful. And not just successful politician, but a successful leader. So you and I have learned this the hard way. Discipline and staying on course to do the right thing is often the hardest possible thing in leadership and in politics, right? So let's talk about an example of this that happened during the last federal campaign. I
Sure.
was in the war room. You were running my local campaign. I was in Calgary too, obviously, but had some responsibilities nationally. There was so much pressure on Jenni as the campaign manager, as well as Pierre as the leader, to quote pivot to talk about Trump without defining what that meant. And Jenni talked about this in her interview, but I saw it firsthand. You have to talk about Trump. You have to talk about Trump. You have to talk about Trump. But here's the thing. That's what the Liberals wanted us to do. The Liberals wanted us to talk about Trump so that we wouldn't be talking about the things that Canadians care about, all the things we've talked about on this podcast so far. Youth unemployment, jobs crisis, crime being on the rise, out of control immigration levels, housing unaffordability, all of the things that we had a solid plan for that we knew Canadians who are desperate for change wanted us to talk about. Of course, the Liberals wanted us to talk about Trump, but the Liberals put out every spinner, every propagandist on their propaganda network, CBC. Oh, the Conservatives won't pivot. They won't pivot. They won't pivot. And the fact that Jenni stood in the breach and, namaste style said, we are going to talk about the issues that we know Canadians want us to talk about right now, which is X, Y, and Z. And of course, like Pierre went out and he talked about trade and he talked about issues, but he wouldn't do what, the Liberal Party spinners on CBC were telling our campaign to do. Do you think that they wanted us to win? Of course not. They wanted to hold on to power.
Yeah.
They didn't give a crap about what was in the best interest of Canadians. They wanted to hold on to power. And I think that if Jenni had blinked for 1 minute throughout that entire time, we would have had at least 25, maybe 30 less seats than we have today. We have an increased opposition that allows us to hold the government to account. Mark Carney does not have a majority government. I am convinced that if she had blinked, we would have been in that scenario where they had a majority government. I know that the Liberals thought that they were going to have a majority government. So my one quibble with her, if she's listening to this on her podcast, was that she didn't take enough credit for herself and the work that she did. Oftentimes in politics, and I get it, like we're a team, and you have this as my chief of staff, you have this motto that comes from the West Wing sitcom. You're like, staff ink stinks. But my one quibble with her is like, she gave a lot of credit to others for work that she did in that interview. And I think when people are like, I saw some people online saying like, oh, Jenni was fired from the campaign manager role. That is not the case. She's going back to her consulting business. And, look, you and I and Jenni over the years, we have had, we have gotten into it, right? But we've always come out of it. Because at the end of the day, leadership and discipline isn't about being liked or, being popular within a certain cohort or something. It is about making the right decisions. And nobody bats 1,000. Nobody in any political party bats 1,000. And there's always, there's always hurt that happens. But at the end of the day, nobody can deny that woman just ran an incredibly, probably we had the highest vote turnout ever. Our vote percentage actually didn't stray that much over from before Trudeau resigned to after. The NDP collapsed. Donald Trump entered the scene with a narrative for Mark Carney, and Mark Carney became the leader. Those things combined, I mean, the fact that we had the outcome that we did is, in a good way, largely her work. So I'm going to give her credit, even if she won't give it to herself, because it's a tough thing to do.
Yeah, no, I think you've hit on that important point around discipline within a campaign. Like she even said, there's no perfect campaigns. Every campaign I've ever been a part of, every campaign I've ever worked on, I have learned something new from, and have looked back and had said, oh, I would do this differently if I had the opportunity, or would think about doing this maybe next time instead of something else. And that's just the mark of somebody who is willing to learn from their past history and then apply it going forward. And so even she has talked about that. But this idea around discipline is really important. Our colleague, I don't know if he coined this phrase, but he's the only one I've ever heard use it, so I like it. Jackson, he talks about touching doorbell, and
Yes,
this comes from
Jackson,
the idea
touch doorbell.
of door knocking. And so the people's on campaign, their criticism, their feedback, the ones who I'm most interested in hearing from are those who have touched doorbell, who have actually been out on the doors, talking to voters, gone around from different community to different community, and actually received some input from voters. And those that touch doorbell in this 2025 campaign can tell you about what sort of issues people were talking about. And it was about affordability. It was about crime. It was about cost of living. It was about housing. It was about these concerns that they were seeing. And so I think, massive, like you said, massive credit to Jenni for both seeing that, creating a campaign and some messaging around that, and then executing that. And so, and yes, there's all sorts of things that go into a campaign. There is a leader, and there is a team, and there are candidates, and there are all sorts of staff and people that make up that. But you still need somebody in charge. You still need somebody at the top
And
that is
a
executing
tough road.
this.
I would never want that job, because I know what it looks like. Like, I think all these armchair quarterbacks on Twitter, which I'm sure most are bots, that, are like, oh, this, oh, that. It's like, these guys would get microwaved in 5 seconds of the pressure that a campaign manager, especially that she just had, you have to sustain that focus and that discipline and that, all of that emotion and all of that focus on you. Like, imagine millions of people ruminating about you on a daily basis, and then staying focused and putting forward a strong policy. She gave credit to Pierre for that on the podcast. I give credit to anybody who has run for our party as a federal leader, for sustaining that type of pressure. But I just, like, some of these, I read some of the stuff online, and I'm like, buddy, you would last 30 seconds. And especially some of the people that, they sort of, our party's open to all. We want people that, don't, obviously aren't going to be volunteering 40 hours a week and stuff like that. But there are some quote strategists who, they put out some pretty scathing critiques without offering any thanks. They did nothing during the campaign outside of shoot darts. And those are the sort of people that I'm just like, I'm not going to take criticism from you, and she shouldn't either. So Jenni, should have taken more credit for yourself, bud.
Yeah, what I'd say to conservatives is save your criticism for where it belongs, is at the Liberals. And for
doesn't mean we can't learn.
Yeah,
doesn't mean we can't.
100%.
We're not going to do things, differently and better. But you can't chase people out of the movement who, even though we're all going to have differences from time to time. You can't chase people out of the movement whose hearts and effort have been there, right? And
100%.
So that's said to a lot of people from a lot of different stripe across our party. I appreciate you. You know who you are, and I think we're in a good space. I hope. Anyway, you know who I don't think is in a good space right now?
Who's
Mark
that?
Carney. Counterintuitive. I'm going to give you a non-obvious. It was you who actually called this.
Okay.
So Mark Carney has not had a particularly great week, and I say this with no glee, because it means that Canada hasn't had a good week, and that we are not in a great position for trade with the US. So do we have a screenshot of the tariff situation right now, before and after he took office?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll read it out for those who are listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So before Mark Carney took office, softwood lumber tariffs were at 14.4%. I think that it's now even more than what it says on this chart. Softwood lumber is now at 27.3%. These are US tariffs on Canada. Energy was 10%, so it hasn't been lowered. Um, Copper is at 50%. Steel and aluminum is at 50%. Non-CUSMA, that's the Canada-US trade agreement, goods are at 35%. So he's increased, like under his tenure, all of these tariffs have increased. And he ran on being like, there's this famous video of him being like, oh man, I'll handle Trump. I'll handle Trump, right? So now we have this real situation where he hasn't been able to deliver on what he promised during the campaign with his elbows up slogans. And you observed that the mainstream media are starting to lower expectations for him ahead of a fall parliamentary session. Why don't you break that down?
Yeah, I think that this is a tactic that we have seen the mainstream media employ, especially as it relates to the Liberals in the past. But I think it's maybe jarring how quickly this is happening and just how blatant it is. And so, like you said, I think the context is important on the front end.
Yeah.
We just had an election where there were some pretty significant promises and commitments made by Mark Carney. He's this great economic negotiator, savior that's going to come in and deal with this. You've outlined kind of where we were and where we are now. But now what you're starting to see is articles like this.
Yes.
That are coming up here. So this is from the Globe and Mail, from the editorial board. The PM drops his elbows, at least for now. Or things like this one here, where it talks about that Carney's plan to cut tens of billions in spending is tough, but doable. But then also ones like this. The worst thing Mark Carney could do is make a deal with Trump. And
Yeah.
I can't imagine a universe in which any of these types of headlines were being written about a Prime Minister, Pierre Poilievre, or any other conservative
No.
for that matter. They would be outraged that we've passed the 100-day mark of the Prime Minister's administration here and have no deal. In fact, we're worse off than we were before. And so they're softening this level of expectation for him, saying, well, maybe we don't actually need a deal. That would be the worst thing. Or that whole elbows up thing, like, oh, it's just for now. He's playing some sort of long game. And then starting to preposition on some of the stuff around the budget, around, well, these budget cuts, they're going to be tough, but like he can do it, or it's going to be a really hard budget, but like we need to get it done. There's no universe in which a conservative government would be given this level of latitude or this level of spin from the media in the midst of a massive economic crisis after having promised that you can get the job done. That's the key point of this. Is this guy came in on this big white horse and this sort of pomp and circumstance and whatnot, and saying like, oh, like he's the guy, we're going to get it done, and we have squat to show for, worse than squat to show
Well,
for.
and this is why it's so important for us as conservatives, as the official opposition, to put high expectations on Carney, which meet the level of expectations he put on himself in the campaign. So this is why Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre went out this week and announced that we would be putting forward demands for a bill that would see critical infrastructure like pipelines, at least with shovels in the ground, by the first anniversary of him becoming prime minister. I believe that was the timeline that we put on it, or when he became leader of the party, because these are the timelines he put on himself. And Sean, I refuse to let the mainstream media let Carney wiggle out of
Absolutely.
delivering, because first of all, our country needs it, but second of all, we have to stop normalizing the lack of ambition that some quarters of our country now accept. And I'm not saying within the Canadian public, but I'm saying within the federal bureaucracy, within certain advocacy groups that make money off of delays of federal infrastructure being not built. There are so many people who profit off of, in one way or another, projects that should be built within a year taking 10 years or never getting built, or people who are just their workplace status quo gets, a little bit disrupted and less gentle when they're asked to actually deliver on a timeline. We can't accept as a country anymore this lack of ambition, because other countries are far ahead of us in being able to actually get things done, right? And as a country and as a people, we can't forget that we can actually just do things. We can actually just
Right.
say, no, we are managing to this. And so when I see these articles, like, softening and saying, well, we shouldn't expect him to be able to deliver. We shouldn't expect Mark Carney to be able to deliver on all of his sweeping rhetoric. No, our country's not at a juncture or at a point in time where we can accept a lack of ambition. And this is why I thought that Poilievre's suggestion for a clear timeline on a pipeline was a good one.
I think that's great, and I think the question then becomes, like, if we're not holding the Liberals accountable for the promises that they made, if we're not holding Carney to his commitment around what he's going to get done, then what are we doing? Then what's the point? Why even put on the charade of any of this? And so I love what you're talking about, this idea around ambition and big things and being able to get things done. And that absolutely should be the level that we're holding the government to. And again, like, people know where you and I stand on this. Yes, I'm conservative. I have bias. Of course, I'm going to be critical of the Liberals, but I'm also critical and want to point out the media narrative that is being spun for people, because I think people are smart enough to see through it and able to have those conversations with others to say, yeah, well, this is the context of why they're talking about, well, elbows down or don't make a deal or whatever. It's about lowering expectations in the midst of a challenging circumstance, but a challenging circumstance that Mark Carney wanted to take on. Nobody forced him to leave his corporate cushy job and come and be Prime Minister of Canada. But then also nobody forced him to make the kind of promises and claims that he made going into the election either. And so, yes, I think people should absolutely be holding his feet to the fire. I cannot wait. Parliament should be back already, but I cannot wait until Parliament is back so that he can actually the Conservatives can try to get some answers and some accountability out of this government. But that's where we are.
Well, there's one group of people that Mark Carney has not lowered expectations for, Sean, and that is Brookfield shareholders. So today, over the weekend, we have this report from Juno News, which shows that Brookfield sees nearly $1 billion second quarter profit compared to last year. Wow, I wonder what was different Q2 year over year.
What could it be?
Crazy. What could it be? I don't know. It's just wild. But, closing on an optimistic note, we've been working hard this summer, prepping for the fall session, busting the Liberals on some of this stuff. And like Sean said earlier, drop us a line in the comments if you've made it this far. It's important for us to let us know what's on your mind so that we're, as we're planning for the fall session and holding the Liberals to account, we know where the public's at in terms of concerns. And once again, we'll remind you to hit auto download on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. If you're catching us on YouTube, on X, click subscribe, click follow. It helps us get this information directly to you. Sean and I think, are going to go enjoy a very wet day in southern Alberta here. Although the sun's actually out in Calgary. That's nice. It's a good thing.
We might get a day or two of it here, maybe.
We might get a day or two of it before it turns back into Vancouver. Anyway, it's a privilege to live in this country, and we're going to keep fighting for it, working hard for you. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening. If you want even more political news, subscribe at michellerempelgarner.substack.com. And if you like what you hear, be sure to share this podcast.